This is the most.
Look like you're happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, for the gram,
Of course. Oh man, we have more people arriving too. This is great. The room's filling up. Anyway, how are you all doing? Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, even though I've never met any of you in person before. I've simply crept my way into each and every one of your DMs to varying degrees. So thank you. I know I has already done an event with us, and she came back, so that's good news. But yeah, I wanted to start by first having us go around the horn and order doesn't matter. We can figure out who goes where, and do introductions of what book you were nominated for, what category, and then if you want to list some of your other works, but just so that we have a bunch of people here and then people online who I know some people have read some have read others. A couple people stiff-armed into just coming to be bodies in a room. But who would like to go first?
I don't mind going first. Hi, everyone. Lora Senf. I am the author of the Blight Harbor books. I write middle grade horror. And this year, my book, The Night Housekeeper, is a finalist in the middle grade category. Last year, actually, The Clackety, the first book in the series, was a finalist. And so the other books that I have out in the world are The Clackety, which is book 1 in Blight Harbor. And coming in September, it's like September 17th, I think, is The Loneliest Place. So that's the third book. That's the third book with this main character. And then there are some others to come that'll kind of be standalones in the same world. So that's me.
All right, Sam, I'm going to call on you next.
I'm Sam Rebelein. I am nominated for Best First Novel or Superior Achievement in First Novel, whatever it is exactly, for Edenville, which I wish I had in front of me so I could also hold up. I do have my certificate, so I guess I can hold that up. But happy to be here.
All right, let's get Johnny in there.
Sure. Johnny Compton, also nominated in Best First Novel or Superior Achievement, as Sam indicated, first novel for my book, The Spite House, which I think I've got a copy over here. It might be a little dusty, but this is what The Spite House looks like, cover-wise. Blocking my light there.
All right, let's get I. Oh.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, you're good. What about you?
I'm Jiang. I'm nominated in, how do you say the category? Superior Achievement and Best Long Fiction with Lincoln. This is what it looks like. It's not upside down, I swear, but it is at the same time. Happy to be here.
All right, we're going to save Sadie for last. CJ, your turn.
Hi, I'm CJ. I am in Sam and Johnny's category for my book Mayfly, which I do have this one, and I'm stoked. Thanks for having us.
You're stokered.
I'm stokered.
Sadie, now your turn.
Hi, I'm Sadie Hartmann, Mother Horror on social media. I am the co-owner of the subscription company Nightworms, and I am the author of 101 Horror Books to Read Before You're Murdered, which is nominated in the category of Superior Achievement for nonfiction.
I am going to have to ask that Sam, Johnny, and CJ all behave themselves with each other today. That there's no friendly competition is fine, but this is being recorded now, so I just want to put that out there. All right. So, sorry, I'm trying to bounce between screen and computer, and I was not a multi-screen kid. I'm too old for that. So the way that I've kind of structured this is going a few people individually, kind of going through a few questions with each person, being mindful of the time that we have, but then kind of knowing that will end up in a conversation between authors, because there is some good overlap between haunted houses and small towns. And, Sadie's book is literally about all of the books, and things like that. I want to say I did try to handpick the people that I did this with to be like the overlap. That wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to throw it out there. So just going forward. But I want to start with Sadie, because I feel like Sadie, being in nonfiction and having written a book about all of the other books of the last, what is it? The oldest book in 101 is from 98. Is that right?
Well, I kind of cheated a little bit, and the oldest book is from 98 was Joe Lansdale's book, The Bottoms, but I cheated and an edition came out in 2000 because I wanted everything to be like 2000 to 2023 when it came out, 2024. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. How does it feel for you being nominated for your first solo title?
I have so much anxiety. I can't even begin to tell you guys about it. Like, I am an introvert that masks as an extrovert. So I was a high school kid who could do drama and do stage performances as someone else. So I'm really used to tucking myself inside of a personality in order to like function in social settings. And so just as soon as my husband was like, StokerCon's like a week away, I was like, no, I'm not ready. I don't want to go. I wish that sometimes I just wish, like, could I just fade into the background and not have to do this? But also I'm extremely proud of my work. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag of emotions for sure. Completely unexpected. My book is a love letter to everybody else's book. So I try to get over imposter syndrome a lot, where I'm just like, hey, I'm just writing about the things that I love. That doesn't really necessarily need to be awarded, because I feel like the authors are who give me so much. Just being able to, have an escape in horror all the time. So I don't know. I feel good. I feel scared. I'm visualizing the moment when I'm at home after the flight with my feet up, being like, oh, that was so fun. That's like my favorite moment right now. The done moment.
I just thought about this, since we have a bunch of people that probably haven't read all of these. Would you all be opposed to quickly doing like a couple sentence pitch of what the premise of each of your books are? Does that sound icky and not fun?
Do it.
It's
Okay.
never fun, but
Okay. I'm going to call it out, because when I say somebody go, everybody's going to jump in at once. So we're going to start with Sam, and then we'll kind of move along the line.
Okay, it starts off very classic. I feel like it's a horror writer who's struggling to come up with an idea. He doesn't really have any credits to his name and gets invited to be the writer in residence at this creepy small town college. His girlfriend is very aware that weird things happen all the time around this college and this whole county surrounding it. And she actually lost a best friend to the mysteries of this county years ago. And from that very, I think sort of, like I said, classic premise, it just becomes very zany and cosmic-y and sort of meta as well. Like, they're aware that they're in a horror movie, which is something that I feel like I've seen in a lot of fiction this year, and that I'm really enjoying, is that characters in stories don't necessarily exist in a vacuum. Like, they're aware of the genre that they're in, which I appreciate. So they start to unravel the mysteries of the town. Quinn, the girlfriend, does. Cam is just an asshole. He's like stuck in his own head. He's a huge narcissist. And that really plays into some of the cosmic themes really well, right? Because cosmic horror is all about how individual human lives are sort of worthless, and who would that be more frightening to than a raging narcissist? It was sort of the idea that I went into this with. And so it just becomes a really fun sort of cinematic ride after that. There's a bit of true crime thrown in. There are monsters and alien worms and other dimensions and weird English professors and Tom Jones music and torture devices, all kinds of fun stuff. All the subgenres that I really love sort of blended together in a fun way. So that's my elevator pitch.
All right, you're next.
Oh. So Leland is basically about a neighborhood called Home, which is filled with a bunch of haunted houses, and people go there to buy them in hopes of conjuring the ghosts of their dead loved ones within the houses. That's my one sentence pitch.
All right, Laura.
So the Blight Harbor books are about Evie Von Wraith. She's almost 13. She lives in the 7th most haunted town in America per capita with her Aunt Desdemona. And in the first book, Des disappears, and Evie has to make a deal with a creature called the Clackety to get her back, which sends her on a quest to kind of a strange other world. She never plans on going back. She's done with it. This is a kid with anxiety. She's not meant to be in a horror story. And needless to say, that's not really her call, because in the second book, the ghosts of Blight Harbor have gone missing. This is the Night House Keeper. And Evie knows that there's something behind that. She knows they wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. One thing leads to another. She ends up back in that strange other world, this time to rescue a ghost that's very dear to her. And she makes a friend named Lark along the way, who is an 11-year-old / 111-year-old ghost. And she's determined to save Lark as well as the town's ghosts, and that's the Night House Keeper.
Amazing. All right, CJ, you're up.
Female Patrick Bateman, who works as an ice princess at the happiest place in the world. Is my
Comedy ensues. Everybody has a good time.
Yeah, exactly. It's heartwarming. It's a hockey romance. Very wholesome. Read it to your kids.
You want to have an omelet afterwards.
Absolutely.
All right, Johnny, you're up.
A father on the run with his daughters for reasons that we do not know agrees out of desperation to stay in a haunted house that is also a spite house, hence the name of the novel. And if you're not familiar with what a spite house is, it is a house literally built out of spite. Look it up on Wikipedia. A lot of fun. You'll enjoy yourself, even if you don't read the book. Read about spite houses. And so we find out whether or not the spite house is haunted. It is. And we find out why the woman who owns the spite house is terrified of going inside and is also desperate to find out why it is haunted and what she can learn from the haunting, as well as what the father on the run can learn from the haunting as well.
All right, Sadie, you're up.
My book, 101 Horror Books to Read Before You're Murdered, are books that I'm recommending people read just to get a good idea of a snapshot, a season of horror that took place and is taking place, modern horror from 2000 to 2024, because there's so many lists. If you look up 100 books to read, on the internet, there are so many lists that include like Dracula, Shirley Jackson, and all of that. So this is just a modern moment of horror recommendations, and you have to read them before you're literally murdered. So it's important.
All right. I think that summed it up. So what I want to do is I want to move to a few pointed questions that will then overlap. Sadie, you already got one for you. We'll go around. CJ, I've already alluded. How does it feel to have completely ruined eggs for an entire demographic of readers?
I mean, I feel honored. I feel blessed. I happily eat soft-boiled eggs all the time.
That's fucked up. I'm just gonna say it. I'll break the curse barrier now. CJ, that's fucked up.
Thank you. I'm sorry I haven't continued the eggs enough in my next book and books after that, but maybe they'll come back. People love them. People love the eggs. You got to give the people what they want.
Yeah, I have read American Rapture, and there I can confirm, no eggs, but plenty of other things that really grossed and or bummed me out and made me grapple with evangelical trauma. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. So Sam, I just want to say there are few debut novels as fun as yours and as funny as Edenville. How were you able to manage to take, because I mean, see, this kind of works with CJ too. No offense, Johnny, your book didn't get me rolling. Your book was a little more, serious.
Light on the jokes. Yeah.
Yeah. The editors, they were like, guys, we got to cut all the jokes from the Spite House. A lot of spite, no jokes. But no, the two of you both had very solid through lines of comedy mixed with some of the weirdest or most depraved things that I read this past year. But Sam, how did you tread that line of horror comedy, that dynamic?
I don't know, because everyone asks, and at this point I feel like I should just be honest and say I don't know. I really started in comedy, so I feel like the comedy comes maybe more easily, and then I just am interested in making that spectrum as broad as possible. If it's something really unexpected and slapstick, that's on the humorous side of the spectrum far enough that it sort of brings that guffaw out. But I feel like then you need the most depraved or weird thing on the other end in order to have the opposite guffaw, the fear guffaw. So I just like stories that have that full gamut. So I don't know how I towed that one. I mean, the fact that you're saying I towed it at all is great.
Saying you don't know is a valid answer. It's you successfully did it, and you're up for the biggest horror award. So I think you did something correct.
Thank you. Yeah, I just I think of everything in terms of bits, even if it's the most terrible thing. The curling iron scene in Mayfly is such a great bit. I wouldn't call that a bit, technically speaking, but it is eliciting the same kind of bodily reaction that a joke would, right? You're sort of waiting for the punchline or the release, and it's the tension in that brings out the horror and the humor a little bit as well. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Also, I actually haven't talked to you about your book, but I also was laughing a lot reading it. And I think I don't know, Adam, if you've hung out with Sam, but Sam is just a really funny person naturally. And I think I suspect all the books are going to have that. You know what I mean? I just feel like it's going to be there. I'm here for it.
Thank you. I'm knee deep in the second Renfield County novel, and there's some bits in there that I'm quite proud of. Some jokes that I am chuckling to myself at my desk. I also will say, as long as we're complimenting each other's work, I just finished Spite House the other day, and even though it's light on the jokes, it really kicked my ass. The way you reveal information and your concept of dead people in general is brilliant. I really loved it.
Also, how much do you love that family? I feel like I'm gonna root for them forever.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun.
No, they're terrible people. What are you guys talking about? See, I can be funny.
Man, I didn't have that on the bingo card for tonight. Johnny rolling with the jokes. And CJ, I haven't hung out with Sam because he, other than accepting this meeting, he does block all of my calls and screens all of them. So we have not linked up in that regard. So
only because he called at 3 a.m. And texts me 8 times in a row. I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Listen. Unhinged female leads, unhinged male leads. We've got it all here. I mean, okay, so moving from comedy to we love a good horror family. Johnny and Lora, and all of your books deal with, in a way, grief and or ghosts and or family. We can kind of go one by one. It doesn't matter who starts. But how and why was it family in that specific way that like a haunting or ghosts or what have you in each of your novels? How did that, come to be the focus?
I kind of just wanted to do a little bit of a impression of Poltergeist, but with a black family. And that's one of my favorite horror films. And the family dynamic is very interesting, and you get to see how desperate people are willing to be. In Poltergeist, they famously are just going to literally throw the dad into a portal into an unseen world with just a rope tied around his waist, which is pretty wild when you think about it. I wouldn't walk into like a dark actual room with just a rope tied around my waist and say, pull me back if something horrible starts happening, much less a dimension that is invisible to the naked eye with not even like proper climbing gear or something attached. There's not even like proper spelunking gear or anything. It's just a DIY operation. But because they're so desperate as a family and they're so in tune with each other and committed to each other, that you can still confront the unspeakable and unfathomable in that brave way, because you'll do anything for your kids, you'll do anything for your siblings, your parents, etc. So I felt like that's just an interesting dynamic to present in a haunted house situation.
Laura, what about you?
Everything I do when I write is sort of one of those Bob Ross happy accident things. Like, I don't seem to do anything on purpose. It just kind of happens, and then we see what works. Desdemona, the aunt in the books, was actually the first character that I had for the Blight Harbor novels. And she came out of a text message that my sister sent me like 5 years ago. It's a long story. But I had this character. I didn't know what to do with her. And then I decided I really wanted to write middle grade horror, because those are the books that mattered to me. And needed my hero, and I came up with Evie, and I felt really good about her. And I wanted to give Evie adults that were supportive and reliable. A lot of times you see stories with kids where adults are completely absent, or they're very unreliable. And Evie's parents are missing. I mean, she's not in a perfect situation, but the adults that are in her life, her sort of found family, her Aunt Desdemona, good family friends, Lily, who's the town librarian, and others, they're really they're reliable constants in her life. And then I wanted to show those relationship dynamics. And they end up being very important to who Evie is as she's struggling through her own trauma of maybe or maybe not having lost her parents. Did that answer your question? I was all over the place.
We're playing fast and loose with the questions. This is really,
Perfect.
As Sam and CJ said, we're all congratulating you just on the fact that you were nominated. This is supposed to be like a pre-Stoker party, kind of a pity party for me because I couldn't go. So I was like, how do I hang out with these people that I admire and really respect without getting to go see them in person? Question, am I right?
Perfect.
But no, it did.
I'm just gonna say stuff when you ask stuff, and we'll make it work.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Even when I ask stuff, honestly.
That's rude. I'm not just gonna
right.
say stuff when you don't ask stuff.
Yeah, perfect. You're the last on this one.
I feel like I always forget questions right after they're asked. But yes, family and loss. I feel like death, particularly in my family and amongst my relatives, is not really something talked about, whether it's like something long past or something recent. So I really try to bring out kind of like the tensions that are lingering in the spaces of a household when deaths occur in Linghuan, and kind of like have it manifest on the page as something loud instead of something repressed and silent. Yeah.
Amazing. We're doing it, guys. Hold on. I'm really struggling with this 2-screen thing. Directly to Johnny, first off, I want to say that I haven't gotten to properly thank you for the fact that you were the first author to ever send me anything. When I reviewed Spite House, I unprompted received a signed copy in my mail of the final copy. It kind of, I don't know, I think a little bit was like, that was before I was working in new books and doing this as my full-time job, but really kind of, I don't know, it meant a lot to see that, authors notice those kind of things. And it definitely has a special spot amongst my many signed books. You just know that your signed book sits very near to my signed Shirley Jackson's. So poetic. So second off, how in the hell did you manage to channel Shirley Jackson so well without being, I would say, both indulgent and derivative in this book? Because there's a spirit, no pun intended, that you captured in this that you just absolutely nailed. But anyway.
I mean, first of all, always intend the pun. By all means, please do. If I captured a spirit for the book, that would be better. I was definitely trying a Shirley Jackson impression in certain places, especially like the opening of the book is my hopeless attempt to try to get to the opening of The Haunting of Hill House in a certain way of characterizing the house itself and making it a living creature. The remainder of it, though, without trying to, I'm thankful for the compliment. I was definitely not trying to do anything too derivative, but a lot of that, I think what probably helped me is that I was maybe being derivative of a lot of different things simultaneously. So the Shirley Jackson parts just got compartmentalized and squeezed into their sections while I was, like I say, trying to do a poltergeist impression, and drawing upon various legends that I've read, Glom's Castle in Scotland, this weird little ghost story that I read when I was a kid about a priest that came back to life and walked down the street to terrorize his mom before he just went away again, just to tell her, or not even tell her, but just show her one last time that he was actually very upset with her for some reason. And all these stories from childhood, all these books, all these various things that I crammed into this one book because I had I don't want to say no confidence, but certainly no sense of certainty or security in my mind, at least, that I'm going to get to another book. So if I only get one shot at this, and I want to try to get everything I can out right here. So the Shirley Jackson stuff, it goes in. The poltergeist stuff, it goes in. The little lore and legends, it all goes in. It all fits in. And so I think that kind of ended up balancing it out to where it doesn't feel, hopefully, overly derivative of any one particular thing, because it's drawing on a lot of different inspirations. I mean, I could go on and on, all these different legends and stuff that I grew up with in Mississippi, and all these stories about houses and alleged houses that were haunted, and it's so many different things that I was packing into one book, because it was like, well, it's either going to get in here or maybe in nothing at all if I never get another chance. So might as well go for it.
I love a book that gets me to learn on accident, and like being able to go down like the Wikipedia rabbit hole of spite houses and the history of them, and then going to weird websites and learning about specific ones. And like, I love that. And that's, I think, whether you were being derivative of a bunch of things or not, I mean, only you would know because you wrote it. But like, as the reader, it doesn't come off that way. And I think the fun factor of being able to say, hey, here's a historical thing that I'd never heard about, and now I'm obsessed with this one concept. I definitely not overshadowed, but it helped channel some of that focus to that too. Shifting to Lora and CJ, you're probably on the most polar opposite sides of this conversation. One of you writing books for literal children and young readers. The Clackety, I think, might be my favorite like young adult, like, or not young adult, middle grade and like young reader horror book I think I've ever read. CJ, you write at the most depraved adult level that would make my mom blush, and I'm glad she's not in this meeting. Sorry, Sam's mom. How
she read it too. I quick
wow.
disclaimer. She or at least part of it. So
Damn,
and had a good
Mom,
time.
Nasty.
Yeah.
Well, how did each of you end up in these polar opposite areas of writing? You can go together, separate.
Um, I can jump in on this one. I'm like you, Sadie. I hang back and get shy on these things. I think like I never thought that I would be writing anything that anyone would think was particularly like out there or transgressive or wild. So I think it was kind of a fun shock to me when like that was the response to Maeve. And honestly, I never thought I'd be getting that response from my second book. I was like, oh, this is my not scary, like tame book. And that has not been the response either. So I think I don't know how to answer. I think I guess that's the stuff that I like, and I guess that might be who I am as a person. And I'm glad that, I think it can be polarizing. I'm glad there's an audience for it somewhere. And, the fact that kind of going balls to the wall, lands me like next to, these two dudes here and the other people in the category, and everybody else here is like, I don't know, I'm feeling pretty grateful. And I think we're gonna have a fun time, and I'll try not to do anything to freak anyone out.
So Adam, the heart of the question is really like, how did I land in middle grade, right? Like, how did I? Yeah. Okay.
Because I feel like with your writing, like you could have gone full adult creepy, because the Clackety, for the age range that it is, I mean, I learned about it from Neil on Talking Scared and that whole discussion when he recommended it to Stephen King. And, I was thoroughly creeped out, and I was not prepared for that in this type. And I feel like if you went in an adult novel, you could go full tilt. And so I'm just curious how you ended up doing what you're doing, because you're killing it. But
Oh, thank you. I have lots of little answers. So I love story, like before everything else, before horror and before all of it, I love story. And I think that middle grade is the one age category that can be read by anybody who loves story, right? You write it for the kids, you write it for the young readers, but it's also for anyone. It's kind of a balancing act, really, when you're doing middle grade. Those were the books that mattered to me. I was a kid with a ton of anxiety, and I felt safe in books. I felt safe in scary books, and I wanted to put that onto the world. It took me a long, long time. I was past 40, almost 40, when I finally decided to seriously write a book. So it took me a long time to get the courage to do it. And those were the books that mattered to me. And honestly, no offense to any of you here, but kids are way cooler than adults, and they're a way better audience. Kids believe magic is real, or they might. Like, they still maybe believe maybe it's real. And they're so hard to scare. Like, they're so brave, and they're so amazing. And so to write for kids, and they can handle really weird, surreal shit. Like, they can really handle the bizarre stuff, and you're like, that's fine. They just roll with it. And so they're just the coolest to write for. So all of those reasons are the reasons I write middle grade. I've got some young adult coming. I've got adult that I want to write that is real close to my heart, but it'll always be middle grade, I think, first and foremost.
Can I jump in and ask because you said that before too, what books in particular were important to you as a kid? Because I was a big Goosebumps kid. I was also very anxious and scared of I was scared of the walls in our house because I knew that electricity was in them, and it would shock me if I touched the walls. So Goosebumps was an easy way to start being a braver kid. What was important for you as a kid?
John Bellairs really was the first. He wrote House of the Clock and Its Walls and a ton of other books. Oh, and I know, Sadie, I know you love him too. He wrote Gothic books for kids, right? And yay, I love it so much. That makes me so happy. Mr. Bellairs, John Bellairs, also did things that I guess I kind of copied. There was always a trustworthy adult in his books. And so you had a kid who shouldn't have been a hero. Kids never should have been heroes. Stuck in a scary situation with a trustworthy adult, saving the day. And that's rad. And that made me feel so brave reading that. And then frankly, I jumped from that to Stephen King. Like there was no in between. So I kind of skipped Goosebumps, and I skipped all of that stuff and just went straight to Cujo. And it was not a good first King book for an 8 or 9 year old, but it's what I did. So it was John Bellairs and then Stephen King. And then later, Neil Gaiman became really important with Coraline. Coraline's, I don't know, the best that ever happened, but
There is kind of like a comfort feeling in every Stephen King book, though, too.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's something that's so hard to like describe, or I can't even really figure out like tangibly what makes it that way. But like that actually, I feel like that progression actually makes like quite a bit of sense. Like there's a coziness almost.
I feel like a part of it. Oh, go ahead, Sadie.
Well, I was gonna say, well, yes, props to John Blair's. He was my first Stephen King, and then it kind of eased me into the deep end of the pool. And then I think to what CJ is saying with his comfort level, he taught me, and like I cut my teeth on those protagonists that you fall in love with and that you grow emotionally attached to. And so horror became this vehicle in which I could wrestle with really big emotions with people that you're really invested in. So all of the like Saw movies and slasher stuff and all of that, where people were just, you don't really get to know them as people. They're just kind of food for the fodder, you know, they just kind of get into the grind. That never really appealed to me. I felt like Stephen King taught me to really fall in love and to really risk it all and have high stakes horror. You know, when you look through Bookstagram stuff and people are talking about books, it's always like, give me something to devastate me. Like, this book killed me. You know, people are always talking about, I died, you know. Like, the first time I read something by Paul Tremblay, I was immediately in his DMs and I was like, I hate you, Paul Tremblay. Like, oh, why'd you do that to me? You know, like, if I don't feel something, like, I don't even know why I'm wasting my time, you know, like, it's just kind of junky, even though I read, you know, popcorn thrillers too. But most of the time I just I want to feel something and I want to go through what those people are going through. And Stephen King definitely set the standard for that, where it was like, okay, this is where we're bumping up this, you know, so.
Sam, did you want to go ahead, or were you?
Oh yeah.
Is the moment past?
I was gonna say, I also feel like at the end of the day, when you're reading a Stephen King book, I always have the sense that it's just Stephen King telling you a story. Like, it's just you with this guy who is going to tell you about these people who generally will like at the very end of it, they make it out okay. You know, most of them make it out all right. And I feel like there's a level of trust just inherently in the story that you're being taken care of no matter where the ride goes, that I really appreciate. And like, especially the like introductions to like Skeleton Crew, or I think he has one at the beginning of Night Shift as well. Like, he's just talking directly to the reader and saying, these are just stories I'm about to tell you. And there's something really safe in that, I feel. I don't know if that resonates with other people's experience of him, but that's certainly how I feel.
I just finished the new collection, and that book gave me all of the like prime Stephen King parts of his career, only flipped, because almost all of these stories are now about old men. And it's funny because for the longest time in Stephen King's books, I know it's like on the internet, it's like a running gag that like all he would talk about when it came to old people was how creaky their bones were. And like, that was all he knew about being old, was your bones are going to creak. It's going to hurt. But now that he, you know, is 76, like all of these characters are like very deeply, you know, insightful and fully realized characters of, you know, older age. And, you know, it was weird getting that version of Stephen King, but yet he still feels like, you know, I mean, Uncle Steve telling me a story, you know, taking me on some wild ride, whether I want to go on it or not. But yeah, I am going to turn this next to Sadie, talking about, you know, people who are iconic in the industry. How do you juggle the fact? I mean, first of all, you're everybody's mom. Like, legally, it's in your name on Instagram. You're all of our moms now. But then also the fact that you know, have run a subscription box, that you are a writer on your own, that you're an editor, that you do all these things, and then like somehow continue to keep your social media account as, you know, active as it is. How do you manage to be Sadie?
I say no a lot. I was actually looking at everyone's face too, and I have like really cool connections with everyone on here because the horror is so we are just like such a tight-knit community. But I worked together with Rob Carroll at Dark Ink. I was curating a line of novellas for him when I's novella came out, and I had the honor of reading it early and giving it a blurb. Sam was in Human Monsters. His story was in Human Monsters. We fell in love with Sam's storytelling voice. And then soon after, he's agented and publishing. CJ and I had an awesome interview together when Mayfly came out, and I was like, girl, what's this book? It is extreme and awesome to the max, and I fucking love it. And then Lora, my niece, reviewed your book. I remember you were like, can I send you this? Yes. And then my niece, I passed it on to her. She gave this amazing review where I was just like, my niece wrote that? Wow. She like texted it to me. It was really cute. And then Johnny, obviously his books, The Spite House, was in our Nightworms package, and we just got messages all the time telling us how much they love that book, how much they love that we exposed them to all kinds of horror across all the genres. Like, honestly, the most fulfilling part of being in this genre is just recommending books and putting the right book in the right people's hands. Like, not every book is for me. I don't fall in love with everything, but after I read something, I know exactly who's going to love that book, and I want them to know about it. So that's my favorite thing. Like, okay, I don't even, there are things that I love and recommend, but honestly, I do feel like a mom. I mean, I have 3 kids and they're all adults. But I also just want my horror children to just find these things and then explore on their own, and just be like, oh, I want more of this. I really enjoyed, The Spite House. Now I want other books that are kind of like that, and I can feed that to them. And that's just my favorite part of what I do. That's my favorite. That's what I was put here for. Like, I tried a lot of other things, editing and writing reviews, but what I just love to do is give people the book that's going to make them happy.
It's the most mommy you could have given.
We're lucky to have you.
It's my pleasure.
So I wanted to ask CJ, this is kind of just a one-off question, but was it editors or was it that recommended not dropping a certain House of Mouse into your, or was that just a new, like a literary device that you were like, this will be fun to not name drop?
So I, first of all, have no idea what you're talking about.
Of course, naturally.
So a draft of my book actually circulated like all of LA before I even, maybe I had just gotten an agent. It was like a journey. It might have been before we sold the book, but at some point it circulated with nothing taken out. No corporation has sued me as of now, so please don't. But 2 different legal teams weighed in very heavily and repeatedly. And it was a journey, and things are copywritten that you would be shocked that are copywritten. And then things are totally not, like Pinocchio or Snow White or The Little Mermaid, so there's a lot that's open source Cinderella that I didn't realize was. Yeah, it was a journey. I will say there's one scene in the book in which the main character Maeve actually sang, and all of the lines from the famous song from the movie were a part of a particularly brutal scene with a mouse. So
incredible.
Thank you. I thought it was great. I was sad to let it go, but yeah, but of course also none of this happened because the theme park's not real.
Did you say that on purpose? You had to have said it on purpose.
What did I? Oh no, did I slip? I'm usually pretty good at not slipping with the
You
words.
said you were
No, you
sad
just had to
to
let it
you were
go.
sad to
Oh!
let it go.
No, that was an accident. Actually, I just hear it all the time in my head now. No, it's just a part of me.
That's fair. That's fair. Now I really want a short story in the Mayfly universe with Steamboat Willie. I think that would be it's just don't put gloves on that little guy. No gloves, and you're good.
Maeve might continue, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, you heard it here first, folks. The mouse don't wear gloves. If the glove don't fit on the mouse, to quit. I don't know.
I was like scared of where that was going.
Yeah.
I was trying to make it something. It didn't work. Sam's over here like, oh god. This is why we let you stick to the comedy. But oops, I muted myself. Okay. Gonna stick with CJ because I want to talk about unreliable, unhinged female narrators. Which would you call Maeve? Would you call her unreliable?
Very much so. Like
Yeah,
I would
I'm
say,
just making sure.
yeah, 100%. Like don't. I mean, I would even call myself unreliable. Like don't listen to us. You know what I mean? Like
Your words, not mine. You said it. You said it.
I think it's like I just Maeve. And I would say, and I too, like a good story, and I think for the sake of fiction, I think that was kind of where I wanted to go with things. But I think there are ways, like certain scenes, I wanted it to be able to be read different ways. Like I wanted it to be a possibility that the bar that she frequents might not even exist at all, and the people in it. And I think I like that sort of uncertainty, and I think it also can make it in some ways more palatable, the things that happen, but also hopefully a little more frightening because it's you don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was curious would you or any of your narrators unreliable? Because a lot of your book, it's a little more ambiguous in certain areas of what is real. And I don't know, because it's a little bit more on the, not to say something's literary versus not literary, but the way that the prose is written, it leaves a little bit more to the imagination in some areas. Would you call any of your narrators unreliable?
I would say both Mrs. and Winchie are both unreliable because they're very much in their head when they are looking at everything. So everything is very much steeped in their subjectivity and their anger and the way they see the world specifically. And it really mismatches with what other characters might see the world as, if that makes sense.
I think Lora might have the most reliable narrator because I think children might be the most reliable when it comes to relaying, like you said, the supernatural and the uncanny because they believe in it. Whereas, the Spite House and, all the weird shit that happens in Edenville, I don't know. I wouldn't trust somebody if an adult told me some of the things that happen there. Whereas if a kid told me those things and with that kind of conviction, I probably would.
Real quick, I'll say that was very intentional with setting everything up in Blight Harbor. I didn't want to have to go through the first quarter of the book saying, "Oh, it's a ghost. Is it really a ghost? Ghosts don't exist. Maybe they do." I didn't want to go through all that. I just wanted her to already believe these things happen. These are real things. And so when she meets Clackety, okay, she hasn't met one quite like this, but she buys into it. She believes it. Yeah, but I agree with you. I think kids just telling you a story with no reason to lie, that's about as reliable as it gets.
I wanted to interject real quick and ask, we never set a time for this. What time are we all dipping out? Because I realize it's 6:50, which is 50 minutes into the conversation. How long are we going?
Did you say? I thought you said. Was it 7:30? That's what it said on my calendar.
Okay, perfect. I didn't set a time. Courtney probably set an official time. I did not. I was just like, I don't know. We've got a bunch of people. I don't know how long this is going to take. We might not get through introductions for a half hour. Perfect. Okay. That all being said, I want to jump to Sam, and we've talked about edits and things with CJ's book and some of the things with, the struggles and ebbs and flows of working on a novel. How long was Edenville on the first draft? Because I feel like there's so much about this town that was like, I know that you have in your head that it was very clear that it was off the page, but didn't make it to the book. Like, was this book like 400,000 words and they were like, homie, that's too long?
No, the actual novel wasn't too much longer. I think only about 8,000 words longer than what it is now, or maybe 10. But it is very much like the nuts of the world. Like, there were 2 other novels in the universe that I wrote and put down and sort of queried around, and they didn't get a lot of traction before Edenville. And so there are a lot of things in Edenville that show up as like vignettes that are an entire novel that exists in some form on my computer, but it's just like waiting to see the light of day. And so that's what I'm really excited about in this next one. There's, it's all characters that grew up in Renfield. And so I think that was one of the big responses that I got to Edenville, is that people wanted to see more of the county. I think that when you're meeting a world, it's important to like arrive in that world with your protagonist so they can meet the character in the same way that you meet that character. But once you're there, you're there, so the next novel is all about people who grew up in this world and how that's affected them. Because I think that's really interesting to me, as far as like, you're a teenager and you're sort of angsty and bitter, plus you live in the most cursed place in the world, so how does that warp your sensibilities? Like, how much more My Chemical Romance do you listen to, if that's true? So yeah, there were other things, like Clarity's story was a whole novella, and that got sort of smushed down to a chapter, but there's a whole other novella about the Mither family that I've been kicking around. And so the actual short answer being that Edenville itself was sort of already the length that it currently is, but there are a lot of different things that like exist on their own as complete stories in the world. And then I feel like Edenville will be more satisfying going back to once you've read those and being like, oh, okay, now I see how it all sort of fits together. So yeah.
I kind of want to take this question and go around to everybody, because I feel like for almost everybody here, I kind of know I's answer a little bit, because we talked just 2 months ago when she joined us for book club. But CJ, I know you said Maeve might continue, but I mean, with this first book, how, like, was there, you've mentioned scenes that were cut for, hypothetical illegal reasons, but how much more like was there that you have bouncing around your head?
This was actually crazy. No scenes were cut. Only words changed or names changed, and a couple catchphrases. But I actually had to add 50 pages. So it was like a really short book. It was crazy. I know nobody ever says that. But basically, my editor, who is also Johnny's editor, said, do we not have the same editor, Kelly?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, I thought so.
Well, because mine used to be Daphne, but now it is Kelly, so yes.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. We have catching up to do. Yeah, so she was basically like, look, I think a couple of these relationships are not like totally fleshed out enough. Like, give me more. And like, there's a tar pit scene that wasn't there initially. There's a Hollywood Forever scene that wasn't there initially. So it was fun, like going around LA and being like, okay, well, where can I kind of like see more things happening? but yeah, so anyway, that it was kind of backwards. I wish that was the case with my second book, but we've cut like 90,000 words. So.
Yeah, it's hard to say. That book is, I mean, I know we just got the bound manuscript, but like even that's a pretty thick little lad.
She's thick. She's a door stopper, as somebody on the team said.
Yeah, no, Johnny, what about you? How many words about very skinny tall houses did you have to cut?
Not that many. It was other stuff I ended up cutting out of the Spite House. I cut an entire cop character, and he basically only gets like a passing sentence or two, and before that he had entire chapters, because I'm fascinated by the idea of any kind of first responder, somebody in a position of authority confronting ghosts is interesting to me. My YouTube, I follow a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, cop ghost stories, nurse ghost stories, trucker ghost stories, which I know is not first responder, but it's still somebody I feel like is very responsible for something. And I feel like there's just a level of verisimilitude that kind of encounters that. It almost kind of reminds me of like what Laura mentioned earlier about you want to be engaged with people who it feels like are just wholly invested in believing to some degree. And I find a lot of the time these are stories that come from people in those kind of positions where their belief seems extremely sincere because they're risking a lot to tell you, I saw a ghost. Like if you're a paramedic and you're like, I saw a ghost in this house and I didn't even want to go in there, but I had to because it's my job. It's like, damn, they really believe that, versus me, Johnny Compton, author, saying, oh, I think I saw a ghost over there. I might just be making that up. It's literally my job. So who knows? So I had that character there, but it was self-indulgent a little bit because I can go on and on about why I love that kind of stuff. And had some suggestions from some beta readers. They were like, is this person really essential, or are they just kind of sidetracking us from what the story should be about? And so that's the biggest cut that I had to make to the Spite House, was that entire character, who then just kind of got disseminated over several other characters for what their purpose was supposed to be.
What about you? What was your journey? Because I know you didn't make cuts in the same way.
So I've discovered that I always have to rewrite my openings. So my opening changed maybe like 3 or 4 times, but the overall book didn't see any cuts outside of that. I actually added on, kind of like CJ, and like it was the character relationships that needed more fleshing out, and kind of like the world building that needed a few more scenes, or like the history of the neighborhood that I added in. So I think it went from maybe like 20,000 to 27,000, I want to say. Yeah.
And Laura, I guess with yours, you can't stop writing. You keep going in this world, and which I love. This world is incredible, and I need to get my hands on the third one before it comes out, so I can get. I can't get enough of it. But did you like when you started? Okay, that wasn't me asking.
Just let's talk. I'll send it to you.
Okay, sick. Okay, where were we? No. Was the Clackety ever a standalone, or did you always?
Yeah. So I was a debut writer, right? And I kind of in my heart wanted to tell more stories out of Blight Harbor, but Clackety was sold as a 1-book deal, and that was that. And I said, could we, in the front of the Clackety, write, hold on, what's, I don't want to tell you. I think it says a Blight Harbor novel in the front of the Clackety. And they said, well, we can't say series because it's not. I said, that's fine. Just say a Blight Harbor novel. Will you do that for me? And they said, sure. And then Clackety did, it came out and did pretty well. I mean, not like huge numbers or anything, but it did better, I think, than they thought it would do. And so I came back to him and said, okay, here's the deal. I want to tell more. I want to tell the rest of Edie's story. I know the rest of her story now. But I can't do it in 1 more book. I have to do it in 2 more books. So it's either got to be a trilogy or it's a standalone. We can't do it in 2. And they said, okay, let's do all 3. And I was super fortunate. My editor just kind of got it. And then I came back and said, hey, can I write some more stories in this world that aren't about Edie? And they said, sure. So I don't know. I'm just going to keep asking for stuff. And Sometimes they tell me no, but I just keep asking, and sometimes they tell me yes, and I just go with the yeses.
How do you think I got all you out here tonight? So you just ask.
You asked
Sadie,
300 writers, and we're the ones that said yes. Is that
no,
what happened?
how about
That's
this?
what I
I
heard.
will say, so first off, Laura, since we're talking to you now, I will say I was most excited about getting you because I had never corresponded with you before. And everybody else I had a good like rapport with enough to be like, oh, they might say yes. They don't think I'm just some weirdo. I mean, they think I'm a weirdo, but not some random weirdo. And but it was really important to me that I've tried to get people from a couple different categories. I figured the people in the, you know, the proper not first novel category, I'm like, yeah, you guys are the big ones. Everybody knows who you are. Get out of here. But I was really interested in getting somebody from nonfiction, some of the debuts, long fiction, and I really wanted somebody from middle grade because we here at Underbrush care a lot about that specific demographic of readers. We don't have children picture books here. We start at middle grade and go on up from there because middle grade are typically the readers that get forgotten and then they don't read and then they grow up to be illiterate adults that vote for really stupid things. So first off, I want to say that. Second off, I want to say, Sadie, how did you manage to narrow down to 101 books? Because I work at a bookstore. There's a lot more than 101 books, period, but let alone 101 horror books. How did you manage it?
Yeah, there was a lot of tears and a lot of like I played some little games with myself, like, okay, like here they're gonna fight it out, like which one, you know. So the 101 could have really been all women because women kick ass. And I could have written that book 100 different ways, including 100 different things with 100 different ideas. Like I love horror so much I could go off on like a lot of different tangents and kind of pull. And I figured if I get this one out, maybe I'll get another shot to write another one. So even though I was sad and I knew that not everything was going to be represented that I wanted to be represented, but I was very intentional about what I did include, just in case. I knew with the clause that was written in my contract that they wanted another look at something if I ever were to have one. So I pitched them, can I do a book with all women, all horror, you know, and dark fiction? And can I just have unlimited? Like, I don't want to be like limited by a list with a number. And they said yes. So I've just been sitting here gathering and reading and writing this whole second book with just women, with a focus and an emphasis on, well, really it's anyone but men. There's some different pronouns in there. It's just no dudes. Because anyway, that's a long story, but that's happening in 2025. And also, like I said before, if you do Google lists of horror, there's so many lists of horror out there just available to anyone for free on the internet. So I really wanted that to reflect my own personal reading journey and experiences, what moved me the most. And then also just not to go back into the annals of history. Like, I just didn't want it to be a list like including things that would for sure be on there, like The Exorcist and Dracula and the House on Haunted Hill, like all of these things. I didn't want those to squeeze out smaller, lesser known books that I really think are valuable for people to read and understand the full scope of horror. So that's how I did it. I really just was like, okay, here's some iconic ones that people probably have heard of, and then here's some in the middle area of like rising stars, and then here's some people I've collected, books that I've collected that I love that nobody's heard about. So that's kind of how that happened.
I love this. You're curating a list for all of us to read while we're locked in a room with a bear. It's very good. This is good. I'm scrolling through my questions. I want to make sure if y'all are cool with it too. that I open it. I mean, I've got people in chat that we can take questions from, but also people in the room. Would that be something you all are okay with? These are unvetted, hard-hitting questions from the street. All right. People in chat, if you want to type them, if there's any, it's okay. If not, I might have to stand and walk up closer to the screen to read them. Anybody here? This group, I will say, is notorious for when I ask them things in our other live streams, it is radio silence. Jacob? Okay. All right.
So this is a little open-ended, but specifically the books that involve kind of like elements of satire, Edenville especially, and Mayfly. How did you negotiate how much satire was too much?
What a good question. I don't know.
You're hired.
I hope I hit that balance, but I maybe felt like I took things too far at times. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, like satire often ends up getting written because you have a feeling about something, and I just kind of wrote my feelings.
I cut my teeth on short stories. I freaking love short stories. And I tend to write short stories as like extended monologues because I also started in theater, and I just think it's a great way to explore things about your character without them having to articulate specific things. Like, I don't know why I do that. Like, that's enough to have a character say, and you're like, okay, I learned a lot about you there, bud. But with the longer works and the novels, I have friends over to read them with me. And so I had friends over to read through like all the lines of dialogue for Cam and Quinn, and the ensemble of like professors and old ladies and whatnot. And any time that they were like, oh, brother, that was like a hard cut, or like, all right, we're going to change that for sure. And also just like running bits by them, like casually, like, what do you think of this joke? And if the reaction isn't immediately like, that's good, like you're asking someone about an outfit, right? And if they're not immediately like, you look great, like if there's any hesitation whatsoever, you're like, time to change. So yeah, I just test out the material, I guess.
Can we call that, is it the Oh Brother test?
Yeah, the Oh Brother. I always think of that one fish in SpongeBob who's like, oh, brother, this guy stinks. Like, that's always sort of in the back of my head when I'm thinking of satire or jokes in general.
I did remember a question that I wanted to ask Lora, specifically because, we have some folks in here that do go pretty hard in the paint when it comes to certain elements of their books. Do you, with writing for middle grade, do you ever have your editors like catch you and be like, whoa, that's too fucked up for children?
Not yet. I got a serial killer in that book. Like, that's kind of cool. That was the one thing I thought wasn't going to happen. I thought they were going to push back on, I've got a character called John Jeffrey Pope, and 3 names, right? And he's the ghost of a serial killer. And I think I got away with him because he's a ghost. Secret for this room only, he's coming back in the prequel as a living person and actively doing his stuff. And I don't know. My editor has that book right now, and I don't know how she's going to feel about it, because he's like an alive serial killer. He's not the ghost of one. So we'll see. But no, I think there's
just... You want me to scrub that from the recording? Okay.
Yeah, I'll get in trouble. It'll be fine. I'll say I'm sorry. But no, I've really not had to dial anything back. Fortunately. But we'll see. I'll let you know.
Anybody else with questions for the group?
I've got a question.
Okay, you don't have to come over here if you don't want to.
I feel like as a horror reader, I get asked a lot like why I enjoy such fucked up stuff and why I like to have nightmares about the books that I read. So I'm curious, as an author, why do you choose to write in the horror genre, and what do you love about that genre specifically?
Do we want me to call out? Do we just want to go through each person and they can answer? Okay, Sam, you go. Or Sadie, you go first. Sadie, you go first.
I tell people all the time, because I get this a lot. But people, like, I remember very clearly one time putting a stack of books on a used bookstore shelf, and the guy was like, "Oh, all my horror books." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I love it." And he's like, "What's wrong with you?" Like, just point blank right to my face. I was like, "Well, a lot. Like, how much time do you have?"
How long you got?
I feel like what people don't understand is some of us live for me personally, I live a very timid life. Like, I am not adventurous. I do not harm my body willingly. I don't jump out of airplanes. I don't want to roll around in the jungle. Like, I don't go camping. I'm very cautious, and I always have been. I used to go down the stairs backwards. My mom thought it was weird that I would just like crawl down instead of just run like most kids. Horror is the way that I get to live adventurously. It's the way that I get to be who I want to be within the parameters of a safe environment where I can wrestle with all of this stuff. Like, other people have other things. People go and do a lot of screwed up stuff that I would never do, and I don't judge. I'm not sitting there going, "Really, you're going to try to jump out of an airplane?" Like, I try to stay inside of it. I don't judge. So I think it's funny when people go, "Oh, that's so messed up," or "Why do you like fucked up things?" It's like, well, why do you paint your nails? I don't know. Like, it's what I do.
All right, CJ, you're next.
This is fun because actually Sadie and I talked about this in another interview at one point. But I think for me, like, it's two things. One is I do put myself in harm's way, but I am afraid of everything. And I'm more afraid of things like in my own head, or like the ways in which you could like inadvertently hurt somebody you love, or like, things you can't see. But I've had nightmares my entire life, and I think I just kind of write down some of the stuff that scares me, and turns out luckily there's an audience for it. And I think the other aspect is like, I think a lot of, every other kind of fiction really talks about life, and death is like a huge part of life. And like, so much of horror is about grappling with grief, anticipatory grief, our mortality, how fragile we are, the way we were built, which is like insane that we are so freaking fragile, walking around so breakable all the time. And I think it's crazy that there's really one genre that predominantly looks at this and chooses not to turn away from it. But I find it to be incredibly powerful and actually life affirming not to turn away from it, and to kind of like interrogate it and find ways to like even romance it a bit, and find ways to walk hand in hand with death, since like we kind of have to, whether we want to or not. So that's my horror.
Woo, I love that answer. That was good.
All right, Sam, let's make you follow that one up.
I also feel like horror makes the supernatural feel accessible to me. I grew up going to church every Sunday, and I didn't feel different after being baptized. I didn't like witness miracles or like speak in tongues, and but then it didn't feel different. But then I would see a door open by itself, and I felt different after that. For like when I was little, those were the sort of miracles that felt like sort of tangible, and especially that they were attached to a certain place. Like I moved to the Hudson Valley when I was about 8, and the Hudson Valley is just riddled with history and stories. And I mean, I'm an hour from Sleepy Hollow and things like that. So it felt like that was the tangible thing, that you could go to a particular place and do the ritual, or like lock yourself in a bathroom and summon Bloody Mary. Like there was just something about horror stories that felt like an orthodoxy that was accessible compared to like going to church. So that was really big for me when I was little. And then I also, you were talking about Saw, Sadie. Saw was actually big for me in high school because it made me aware of my body in a way that I wasn't. Like I never really played sports. I was never very like active in any way when I was growing up. And then I would watch a Saw movie and I'd be like, oh yeah, I bet I could do that. You know, that's what got me to start thinking about my body. So yeah, it just made things feel tangible and accessible to me. And I would also throw this question back to the asker as well when everyone's done asking, because I want to hear your answer too.
I love this. I can't wait to make her answer. I'll probably answer too, but I will have you go next.
I feel like people often describe Linghorn as a meditation, and I feel like that is really what horror is to me in a way. I like growing up, I asked a lot of questions, and not many of them get answered, especially the existential ones. And I feel like horror kind of helps me unpack all my chaotic thoughts about it and my serial overthinker thoughts about all things fear and like things I worry about in life.
All right, Laura, we're going to save Johnny for last.
All right. I don't know if my answer's that deep. The world sucks and it's scary, and I'm an anxious introvert, and so I don't like being in the world because it sucks and it's scary, and I'm afraid of everything. But also, there's two parts. Also, I believe in everything. Like I'm the opposite of an agnostic. I believe in everything. Like my kids ask me, "Are ghosts real?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I don't know, probably." And so like I'm open to all of it. And when you read horror, you get to be like a fake badass. You get to like set aside all of your anxiety, and you get to set aside the fact that the world sucks and it's scary, and go into an even maybe scarier world where all of the things that might be real are real, and you get to just be cool and brave for a while. I don't know. That's like the biggest high. That's so much fun. I got hooked on it when I was a little kid, and I never looked back.
Johnny, it's you.
Similar to everybody else, I agree with all those answers. Similar to what Laura just said as well. I got hooked on it when I was a kid and never looked back. But also, I have a big rant about this, so I'm going to try to consolidate my thoughts as much as possible. Horror is extremely popular, and people ask that question of why horror, and I'm like, you do realize once upon a time the biggest song in the world was Thriller, and it's literally just a song about going to the horror movie. And it name drops Jaws and Alien. The biggest writer in the world for like most of my life was Stephen King. Just hugely, enormously popular, the biggest writer in the world, commercials, everything. It was like the Bible, Stephen King. You know, that was like how much people read. It's an extraordinarily popular subject. And I think a lot of people are in massive denial about how popular it is, but there's like really no other genre that gets its own holiday where people are all hyper into participating, except for maybe romance, which is also a very underrated genre, and it gets its own holiday with Valentine's Day. So the two genres that kind of are regulated to like, oh, you read that, they're also so massively popular that we have entire days dedicated to them. I love action movies. I love spy novels. There's not Spy Day. There's not Action Day. There's not John Wick Day. Probably, thank God. Everything I've ever read, almost, unless you're reading exclusively math books or something, virtually everything that you're into has horror. Even if you're just like, I'm into nothing but fact. If you just read a lot of science books, you're going to read some really horrifying stuff. I was sitting next to Hiram Ennis, author of Leech, at the Tucson Book Festival a couple of years ago, and they are a scientist and they have medical knowledge, and they were just spitting medical facts during the panel, and it was some of the scariest shit I've ever heard in my life. And everybody was fascinated and interested, and people read and watch to varying degrees these horror stories. I remember sitting and watching war documentaries with my father and grandfather, neither of whom would probably consider themselves horror fans. But we're sitting there watching a war documentary, and it's all about this time a tank snuck up on another tank, shot at the tank, blew it up, and the men burned alive inside the other tank. And the people are relaying this, and it's very matter of fact, and it's got like that old A&E documentary music behind you, and it's like horns and stuff, and it makes you feel like, oh, somber. And I'm like, this is horrifying. These guys were burning to death inside a giant metal casket, a machine of war. This is horror. It's always there. It's extremely popular. And when people are like, why horror? I don't even know how to process the answer without going into this rant, because I'm like, what do you mean why? Why breathe? Why anything? Why paint your nails, like you said? This is part of what we are and what we do. It is there. Now, you might be in denial about it. You might want to call it whatever else you want to call it. But it is horror, and it's present, and we're just kind of more open about our love for it.
I feel like Johnny just took us to church, first of all.
Yeah, holy shit.
I'm like, everything you're saying, I'm just like, amen, amen. Like, that is, and the Bible is straight up horror. Like, if you haven't read the Bible, like, you're reading it with rose-colored glasses, because that shit is scary as well. So,
Sadie,
when horror become popular too, Johnny? During all the world wars is when people were like, give us horror. Like, that's what they wanted.
When you talk about the Bible, and I mentioned this, I'm kind of spilling the beans a little bit. There's a throwaway line, but I love it, about this in my second book coming out in September. Every Christian, and I've got Christian family. I'm not blasting anybody. I don't mean this to be any kind of disrespect, but we're all walking around. You're all walking around. If you got a cross on your neck, it is a torture. You might as well have an electric chair on your necklace.
Right.
This is a torture device. This is like the means of execution.
Right.
And this is the most beloved symbol for probably the most influential religion in the world. And it is a device of horror.
Dying on their walls.
Emaciated, dying, stabbed. Yeah. This is horror. What are we talking about? Like, everybody is
metal. It's pretty metal.
It's extremely metal.
It is.
It is wild that this was what was settled upon by like Christianity, is like, of all the symbols we could go with, we have like the fish option. We have so many different things, symbols of peace, the dove. Hey, that cross though, isn't that wild? What if we use that? That could help us mobilize forces. I could go on a whole different rant with that. But that is, like, to Sadie's point, like, this is, if you read the Bible, there are so many other horror stories within it. I mean, it's loaded with them. And it all boils down to, I mean, I've probably got a Bible around here somewhere that my grandmother gave me, and it probably has a cross on it. It has this murder weapon on this holy book. This is what we're about. This is the human experience. We're all into it. We're just, some of us are in denial about it.
We're all into it. I love it.
I get asked this all the time, working in a bookstore and being the guy with, horror tattoos. I've got Junji Ito on my arm, and, things like that people are like, so why do you run a horror book club? How is that your biggest book club? What's wrong with you? And I always tell people exactly what Johnny said, is it is the only genre that's literally in everything. I'm like, you read Cormac McCarthy, you read a Blood Meridian, like, dude, you can't tell me, oh, it's Western literature. It's like, it's pretty, like, All Quiet on the Western Front is the one that I point to, and I'm like, that is a horror novel. That is a horror film. Like, the new one on Netflix, it's like, that is one of the scariest films I have ever seen. I would be remiss if I didn't, in a discussion, ever mention Mike Flanagan. But like, everything that he does, like, horror is the backdrop. It isn't about the genre parts of it. It's about the human parts of it, because the horror in the background is the shared experience of every single one of those characters that maybe, depending on who you ask, have too many monologues. But that's not the point. It's about, the experience of living, and then, like CJ said, it's holding the hand of death as you move through this, because there's no other way. I don't know. I think people are just inherently stupid. So when they come in and ask things I'm like that, I'm like, you don't actually want to know my answer. You want to make me feel a certain way to make you feel a certain way. Because if I answer you honestly, you're gonna browse, or nod your head politely, or tell me let's go Brandon or something. But anyway, I think it's Maddie's turn to answer. Johnny, or who said? Sam said that you have to answer. So.
Yeah, you're not off the hook for sure. I want to hear.
feel like we should come over there because I feel
Yeah.
like awkward talking to everybody.
This is our most regular that doesn't even live in the state.
Yeah.
She lives in Kansas City, and we're in not Kansas City, in Arkansas, and probably buys more books from us than anybody else that's local. So
Adam calls me about every single time that there's a signed copy of something because he knows that I will purchase it. So I love that. I feel like I love the horror genre so much because I think it is so impactful. Just the way that fear can really portray other emotions and other feelings as well. Like the themes of, grief, or like Johnny, the family trauma in Spite House. And it can just be such an intense way to really comprehend all of those metaphors in everyday life as well. So I think that's my favorite part about it. And I'm just always so in awe of all the authors who can write such crazy, gory, and intense scenes while also having the happy family moments and stuff. At the same time, I don't know. I absolutely love those stories. So thank you for writing the crazy stuff that I get to read every day.
I love reading Edenville and then seeing Sam's face and just being like, that guy? Really? I'm like, man, I'll take it. It's my favorite.
Thank you.
Insert that for all of y'all. But I mean, all right, we've got a couple minutes. We're going to wrap up. But I want to, first, I want to thank you guys for taking the chance to talk to me outside of Instagram DMs. I know it's always a risk, or it seems like a risk when they let the autistic kid have a mic. And somehow my bosses let me do this for a living and trust me with their business and livelihood. So thanks to them. Thank you to you all for, one, continuing to write and do the damn thing. But then also, three of you, this is your debut novel. You guys are have broken out. Nobody knew who you were, before this. And now you are authors that I hear about in all of the circles that I, frequent online. CJ, I heard about your book from fucking Stephen Graham Jones. That was the first time I heard Mayfly mentioned was before it came out. And he was like, yeah, I read this little book. And it's just crazy. But I want to go around to all of y'all, and I want to have you each say what the next thing that you have that is coming out, if it's announced, or that you're working on. And then we'll say goodbye. And then hopefully when you all have these different things that come out, we can do this maybe more one-on-one again, with knowing that any of y'all can always pop in. I have told all of our book club people that we've done meetings with, Clay, Nat, Cassidy, Liz. I know Liz popped in before we'd even done an event with her. She popped into Nat Cassidy's call. But you all are welcome back anytime we do an event, to pop in the whole time, little time to as a cameo to give shit to your fellow author, whatever it is. But let's start off. We're going to start with Sadie, and then we'll all call names.
Tentatively titled Feral and Hysterical, my next book is all about women in horror and dark fiction. I'm crossing all the genres. It's not going to just stick in the horror realm. It's going to go outside of that a little bit. Everything is curated into reading lists, which is the way I read. So it's going to have things like places, books that take place in swamps, or it's going to be haunted houses. It's going to be, a reading list based off of just whatever vibe. They're very, very oddly specific. And so it's all curated like that in a large tome with illustrations, possibly hardcover, and that will be in the fall of 2025. And yeah, thank you for having us. This was great.
All right, CJ, you're up.
My second book, which Adam has read, is called American Rapture, and it comes in October. Basically,
fucking rules.
Thank you. It's taken me 10 freaking years to finish this book, so I'm feeling good now. but it's basically like a very sheltered teenage Catholic girl in the Midwest begins to come into her sexual awakening at the same time as a pandemic rips through that makes people basically like feral, like it's a sexually propagating virus and it's very violently sexually propagating. And she has to cross the state of Wisconsin, the great state, to find a family member, and kind of has to like learn entirely about the world that she's never been allowed to learn about. That, you know, it's like, I wrote it, so it's like neon and, you know, divey places and roadside attractions and bizarro America and lots of dairy products, and it's a like an Inferno retelling too.
Everybody go to CJ's Instagram and look at the mood boards that she's posted. Like my favorite thing for updates. Like I think only next to Scott Leeds, you know, viral marketing for his book. I think your mood boards are my favorite marketing I've seen in a while.
Wow, thank you.
Welcome. All right, Sam.
I have a collection of Renfield County stories coming out in February, I think. Winter 2025. It's half collection, half novel. There's a frame narrative about a woman whose mother has just killed herself, and she's trying to figure out if, how much of that is the county's fault, because this curse in Renfield County affects everyone in different ways, and so she's trying to figure out just how much it's affected her family. And as she's researching the history of the county, she's connecting that history to various stories. And so it's like her emails to her brother in between all these short stories. So that's coming out, which I'm very excited for, because that was really where Renfield County started. And it's a very different vibe from Edenville. And then I'm working on a novel that's set in the same world that I don't know how much I can say about. But it's cults related. It's two people. One story takes place in 2009, and then the other one is 2019. It's apocalyptic. It's very cool. It's very cool. That's my pitch. It's really good, you guys. But I'm really excited about that one. I feel like Edenville was just sort of a fun time, and there wasn't anything that I really purged in writing that book, but this one felt very cathartic. So I'm excited to share this, and then there's a couple other things that I've got in the cooker that I definitely can't talk about. So
we just had someone in the chat say, "I think I can see Renfield County from my house."
That's Christine is in Renfield County. She's in the Hudson Valley, so.
Incredible.
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
So I have a novella duology coming out with Titan Books, the first of which is A Palace Near the Wind, coming out next year in April on the 8th, I believe. So the cover reveal is coming soon, and I'm very excited about it. But it's like equal parts dark fantasy, eco-punk, cli-fi, and steampunk with horror in it too, where it's like industrialism versus nature through a secondary world where there's a princess of nature who tries to prevent humans from basically colonizing her home and then discovering the secrets of her family's origins in the process.
And that is why I is up for like 17 awards this season. So
holy shit, that is awesome.
Yeah, I how many awards are you up for right now? How many is it?
10.
All right, Laura, you're up.
Let's see. So the third Blight Harbor book comes out in September. That's going to be the end of Evie's story for now. That's called The Loneliest Place. And then on New Year's Eve, actually, I'll have a young adult book out. It's maybe more dark fantasy than horror. It's called The Losting Fountain. So that's New Year's Eve. And then fall of 25, Pennies, which is the standalone prequel in Blight Harbor. And then fall of 26, I haven't written it yet. I don't know. It'll be a Blight Harbor book. And there's a small something coming out next year that I can't talk about yet.
All right, Johnny, that leaves you.
Devils Kill Devils. It is coming out in September. The
Book also rips.
Thank you.
I've read this one too.
The I guess nutshell of it, opening chapter, we meet a young lady named Sarita Bardalis in marital bliss. She is enjoying her wedding night with Frank, who is the love of her life. She has a guardian angel who has saved her multiple times in her life, thankfully. Unfortunately, though, the guardian angel shows up on her wedding night and beats Frank to death. And so we find out he's probably not an angel after all, and we need to then determine what exactly he is. And if he's not an angel, then what has he been saving Sarita for all this time? And the story goes from there.
Oh shit! I need that right now.
If the Spite House was a small, like, intimate family haunted house novel, this is like the most sprawling. Like, Johnny could not have gone like further out from what the Spite House was, and it's like phenomenal.
I need it. Like, Tor Nightflyer, hook me up.
I am going to make my own shameless plug at the end, because I can officially say that I have my first short story coming out in a collection in October from Slay House. So one submission, one acceptance. I'm going to bow out there. 100% success rate. We're going to call it that. But yeah. But no, thank you guys so much for doing this. Because again, I know it's probably not every day that somebody, well, maybe it is. I don't know how it is being, going to cons and things like that. But, I don't know how many people in the, Arkansas are like, hey, you want to zoom in for a meeting and then nobody might show up to. So I appreciate you taking your time out to do this. It does mean a lot. We sell a lot of horror here. A lot of y'all's books have gone through these shelves just in the 7 months we've been in this spot, and there's going to be a hell of a lot more of them. So
thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
This is
you.
great.
We'll do this again when y'all's new books come out. We'll go down the line.
Congrats to everybody. I'm like so
Yeah.
excited to see you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't wait. And honestly, you said that bit about jokingly, like, don't compete, like, don't whatever. I feel like there's no competitive bone in my body in this category. Like, it's such a strong, I can't believe I'm even like nominated amongst these other, like, it's just insane. I'm just
It's
excited
all
to
our
be here.
friends. We're all
Yeah,
friends.
it's like
It's the sweetest thing.
like it's
All
just
I'll
a
say-
really fun time. So
Since we don't have anybody from the category in here, if Tananarive doesn't win, I'll eat my fucking shoe. Like, that book better win. That's all I'm saying. I'm just calling it here. If you
And
haven't
on
read,
that note,
Right?
no, I mean, for real. If you guys haven't read The Reformatory,
The
go read that
Reformatory
book.
is fantastic.
I've read it twice now.
Amazing.
Yeah,
It's
Amazing.
brilliant.
Anyway, but yeah, no, thank you all so much. Again, I will say it forever. But yeah, you guys are never strangers. As we, continue to grow, y'all are welcome. If you, get, the publishers will let you come out here. If you all really like mountain biking for whatever reason, we are the self-appointed mountain biking capital of the world. Thanks to the Walmart funded trails in the area. I feel like, CJ, if you were going to do like American Rapture 2 Electric Boogaloo, this would be like where you would study, because it is the hometown of Walmart. Like,
I have a Walmart vampire trucker novel that I might return to at one point. But you're you're picking it up. Like, we're on a level here.
seriously, open invitation. Come here. I'll take you around all the Walmart related places and can tell you all about the, probable cults and weird, blood sex orgies that happen in Walmart town.
Oh my god.
I'm going to get picked up in a black van later.
You are.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
bye.
Everyone.